My name is Mike Hogan. I'm the Vice President of Services at Seller Labs, and I run a managed services team. I also work with our advertising team with Ignite Plus, and I get the pleasure to introduce Colleen. We met last night, and she was part of the Women's Mastermind yesterday. But let me read you quickly what Colleen is famous for, but she'll tell us some more things too. She's the Chief Operating Officer at Smart Marketer, founded by Ezra Firestone. And Ezra apparently is the Mick Jagger of the Amazon world, so she's got a lot to wrangle. She's an operations expert, process expert, which I admire and am looking forward to hearing more about. But she implemented systems necessary to calm the chaos. They were growing incredibly quickly and actually tripled their business, Smart Marketer's business, and productivity in just 12 months. And in doing so, did this all using very interesting techniques that were keeping life balance for her whole entire team, keeping everyone happy and productive, and that's a tough balancing act to do.
Which I did learn yesterday is not completely possible. Balance is really a myth. But
so put your hands together for Colleen.
Thanks so much, Mike. I got my mic. Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about, talk about a tough act to follow, Liz. That was amazing. Lots of really good tactical stuff. I'm going to talk about the stuff that you don't usually hear about at these types of conferences. And I'm going to hopefully get the slides to work, too. No. Over here. But I am going to take you from chaos to calm. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know I got a laser pointer too. But I was using this back here. I know, Jeff told me the back button would work. Oh, it's working now. Nice. Okay. Thanks, Eric. Needs a professional. Thank you. Yeah, so as I said, we're going to talk about the stuff that you don't really hear about at these types of conferences. But that's because they're not really as exciting as learning about Facebook or Amazon strategies or as sexy as sales funnels, but it is definitely the stuff that will help build a strong foundation for your business. Unless, of course, you're a nerd like me, then you're all about this type of stuff. We're going to talk about systems and processes and organization and management, the stuff that allows everything in your business to run and grow and thrive. And it's really the foundation that will ultimately determine your long-term success. But first, I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of a backstory. For those of you who don't know me, as Mike just said, I am Colleen Taylor. I'm the CEO of Smart Marketer, founded by Ezra Firestone. Ezra is a unique character if you've ever heard him speak. He's super fun and super engaging. In fact, he texted me this morning and told me to make sure I move around a lot. He said, make sure you step around. Yesterday, I sent him a little video from the women's conference, and I was sort of standing still behind a podium. So he's like, you got to get out there, you got to move, So here I am moving. So basically, I met Ezra about 4 or 5 years ago at a company called Digital Marketer, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that backstory in a minute. And essentially, Ezra was building his first, he was doing a JV with Digital Marketer, building his very first information product launch. So Ezra has a multi-7-figure e-commerce brand called Boom by Cindy Joseph. And the things that he was learning in that business, he was creating information products around. So he coupled with Digital Marketer to create his first information product launch, and I happened to be the project manager for that launch. So that's how I got to know Ezra Firestone, was through being a project manager for him. And this first product was called the Brown Box Formula, and it was an Amazon related business. He was teaching people how to sell stuff on Amazon. And that was back in 2013, as I said. And one of the things that was interesting about Ezra, he was in his 20s at the time, and he was already making a name for himself as like the expert in e-commerce. And I thought, who is this kid? Like he just, how is he the expert? I think a lot of it has to do with personality and his willingness, as Liz just did, to share everything that he was learning in his businesses. One thing was for sure that I learned very quickly was that this guy was spinning a lot of plates. In his mid-20s, he had a team already. He was, dealing with a multi-million-dollar brand, and I was pretty much in awe of how much he was able to accomplish with this small team that he had. But they were small, but they were mighty. They were doing a lot of stuff. And we finished that launch, and Ezra, we kind of went our separate ways. I moved out of the digital marketer company and started my own agency, helping businesses launch products and do project management, build some affiliate networks, and also, implement systems into their businesses so they could scale. And Ezra just kept building stuff, just kept starting new stores and new brands, and growing successful e-commerce brands. And also teaching people, as I said, how to do exactly what he was doing. Because he has just this huge personality, and he was speaking on stages, and people wanted to know what he was up to. And something that I observed in my couple of years after that experience of meeting Ezra was that a lot of the business owners that I was working with, they were overworked. They really felt overworked. They were under-systematized, and a lot of people were either burned out or they were on their way to being burned out, a lot of these business owners. And a lot of it was the rapid speed at which they were growing. And in fact, I found that the most common experience for people who were running these businesses is that at some point, they're going to push too hard, they're going to try to do too much, and it's going to end up costing them in some big way. Oops. And that's when this happened. So I'm doing my thing, I have my agency, it's growing, pretty rapidly. I'm learning a ton of stuff. As I said, these things, I didn't realize that, these very successful business owners, they were burned out. They had no time, and I was each client that I worked with, I was discovering like this is a real thing. This is very common, and so a couple years into that business, as I said, Ezra and I had kind of gone our separate ways after that project, and I kind of thought, what's this guy up to? And interestingly, I listened to a podcast by a guy by the name of Todd Herman. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He has a great little podcast called Grit and Hustle, and Ezra was a guest on that podcast. And one of the girls that I had helping me grow my agency business was, I said, sometimes the client's not the right client for you. We had a big client that I was kind of looking at, like, I would like to sort of fire this client, but we were making a lot of money from him. So I was really starting to realize that that it's not necessarily the amount a client is paying you. You really want to have a pleasurable experience working with them, and I'm sure everyone kind of gets it, that like the real thorns in your side. You really have to think about it. Is it worth it? Is what you're making worth it to work with that client? And there was this one particular client, I said, no, but when you're running a business, you got to kind of replace that income before you can feel safe about, letting one go. So I was listening to this podcast, and I happened to listen to this episode where they were interviewing Ezra, and I thought, I remember this guy, and I listened to it, and just, the thought and care he put into talking about the people that he works with and the experience that he wants to create for not only his clients, but for his team. I thought, this is the kind of client that I would like to work with. And within 3 days of listening to that podcast, Ezra sends me this Facebook message, almost like a, hey, do you remember me kind of thing? And I thought, wow, that is really, that's the universe kind of saying, we've got something for you. So Ezra just, he reached out, he said, hey, how you doing? Just give me a ping when you have a minute. And I pinged him back, and we had a little conversation. So this is the podcast that I was listening to. And on that phone call, Ezra kind of explained that his business was really starting to grow super fast. He had obviously figured out a lot about how to run that business effectively, but things felt chaotic. So here's this theme coming up again. He felt like, things are so chaotic. My team is tired. I'm the manager of everything. I'm the one person holding everyone accountable. He was the one person making sure that all the projects, all the deadlines, everything was communicated to everyone. And he was the person that was guaranteeing all the day-to-day operations of the business. So nothing could happen without it going through Ezra first. And this worked out pretty well for a while his team was just a couple of people. But again, as I said, he was growing super fast, and he needed to scale, and he realized a couple of things. First, that he was managing his business a lot more than he was working on his business or in his business. So he was really sort of making sure that everything was getting done, and the innovation part of his business, the real navigating and what are we going to do next, that's pretty much halted. He was too busy, figuring out customer service and making sure the deadlines were met. And so he became the bottleneck for everything in his business. And it was coming at a price. As I said, it's going to cost you. Eventually, it's going to cost you. And Ezra was really starting to feel he was paying that price. These are his words. In fact, I stole this slide from him. Chaos and madness. Like, who uses that to describe their business? Chaos and madness, he says, were the backdrop of his business. Things were never planned out in advance. I remember when I first started working alongside him, I said, what's on the calendar? And he was like, I don't know, you tell me. Let's get the calendar out. Like the first time he brought the calendar out and said, let's plan things in advance. They were always cramming. His team was always cramming to get things done at the last minute, but they were excited about it. But as you may know, that excitement can only last so long. You can only go without so much sleep for so long. And so Ezra was really driving his business when he really needed to be navigating it. Again, like that innovation, what's the next thing we're going to do, kind of looking out, into the future and seeing what the business was going to do next. He had no time for that. He was driving. One thing I wanted to note is you'll notice the time on this message. And I think this illustrates this point pretty well. I live in California, so it's 10:23 p.m. in California, which means Ezra, who is on the East Coast, it's 1:23 in the morning, and he's sending me this thing. It was almost like a cry for help, like just a call of desperation. At 1:30 in the morning, he's going to ping me and be like, girl, I need your help. So he realized he needed some help, and his team, interestingly, was made up of a bunch of creatives. And Ezra has a very unique philosophy for building his team, which many of you may have too. If you're starting, it's a family business. You hire your brother, your cousin. Ezra's cousin is our head copywriter. He's hired just about all the people he's grown up with. We have a very tight-knit, it's a family unit. And so even for me as an outsider to kind of come in, especially in the position that I came in, which was, let's whip these people into shape. Like, I'm whipping his family into shape. So there's that dynamic that you really need to kind of be sensitive to. And they were all creative types, a lot of artists on our team. And he really needed this person who was going to come and bring, I reference Myers-Briggs a whole lot, who was going to bring the thinker-judger side of things into his business. Who's going to help set things straight, create systems, because it wasn't going to be Ezra. And so we started organizing the operations of the business. He needed someone who was going to restore order. And I say to him, as if there was ever really order here, there was certainly something was going on. There was some kind of magic that was happening. But again, things aren't going to last forever if people are burnt out. So he wanted to have someone who could bring ease and just that space to create again, that space to innovate. He needed to help bring that back into their work life. So he still hadn't figured out that one, as he called it, that one big thing that was really going to, help his business be able to scale at a consistent pace. He was able to scale here and there, but then they'd have to pull back because, somebody wanted to go on vacation or, and things halted when you're a small team and everybody is just, at 100% capacity. He wanted to be able to do this without anyone burning out. So what was that big thing? I think you probably guessed it by now. That was project management. And so he needed someone like me. And this picture, which he took, cracks me up. Sort of, a pretty good match there, a pretty good resemblance. That's me. So remember, I mentioned what I had observed in so many of those businesses that I was helping, that I was working with is, he didn't know it at the time, but I had been sort of quietly calming the chaos for a lot of these companies that I was working with. I just recognized that right away, and I was like, you need to reel it in a little. Let's figure out where the resources are needed. And I knew I could help Ezra too. And I really liked Ezra. He's a really cool guy. Having known that from working with him, on that JV project just a few years before, I knew I could help him, and I knew that this was the type of person that I wanted to work with, someone who was going to be fun to work with. So we rolled up our sleeves and we got to work. He had already done, I want to make this clear, he had already done, as many of you, I'm sure, you've done the heavy lifting. You've curated a team already. These people on this particular team of Ezra's, they were enthusiastic. They were excited. They were happy to be helping build a business with their friend, their childhood friend, their cousin, and Ezra, who's just a spectacular human being. He had already established some of these routines for getting this stuff accomplished. So it's not like I walked in there, although he called it chaotic, and that is his word for it. It was a little crazy, but they were doing pretty well despite all of that. But they needed to refine and kind of build on those routines that the team had simply outgrown. They're trying to get bigger. They were a small team. They were outgrowing these, kind of quick and dirty types of routines. So the first thing I want to talk about is stopping the bleeding. So this is what I came in to do, and I said, Ezra, here's the plan. We're going to do these 3 very simple things just to kind of calm this chaos down. We're going to just chill everything out. The first of those things was job descriptions. Now, job descriptions are a super easy place to start because there's no real agenda to, what do you do? Let's write it down. Who's responsible for what? And it was easy for me to come in and do that from the outside. Again, remember I mentioned that dynamic of this is family. This is people been, working side by side forever. Some of them that he's known since they were born. And, here's who's this lady coming in here. She's all of a sudden going to ask me what I do and how long does it take and all of that. It kind of can feel a little bit confrontational. But I just need to know what everyone does, and so job descriptions was that easy place to start. And everyone on your team, by the way, should have very clearly defined roles. Even if that's you, that means know what you're responsible for. And it sounds pretty obvious, but I know from past experience that projects, they can come to a grinding halt pretty quickly. Because nobody actually knows that they own that particular piece. Oh, I thought someone else was taking care of that. So super clear job descriptions was job one, and that went pretty far in calming that down. The second kind of these top 3 for stopping the bleeding was delegation. You hear this everywhere. You have to delegate to scale. You really do. And this is especially true if you're the one doing everything. If you have a super small team as the business owner, you got to start getting stuff off your plate. So look at the items on your plate. Are they the best use of your time as the business owner, as the navigator, the person who really is going to be growing the business? And you need to be honest with yourself about this exercise. We had a few times where Ezra wanted to be the person who ran the team call. Okay, you can run the team call. And the team call would go for 90 minutes. And we would talk about all sorts of fun stuff, but we actually didn't have a game plan at the end of that 90 minutes. So we sort of reeled that in a little bit. And if it's not the best use of your time as a business owner, get it off your plate so that you can get back to innovating. That goal for the business owner is to be the innovator, the navigator. And we call this, as this is Ezra's term, he calls it buying help. You're buying help for your business. You know, you need help in creating ads, you need help in whatever it is, you're gonna need to pay for that. So it's as simple as that, to, you know, put it as simple as possible. You're buying help for your business. And I just want to kind of like bust this myth too. You don't have to have a huge team. You just need to know who on your team is doing what. You got to delegate the stuff that isn't going to help you innovate and grow in your business, and you know, and you need to pay for that help. So this is a quote direct from Ezra. Scale can only come from the outside, and delegation is the ability to buy help is key. And delegation has allowed him to go back to navigating from driving his business, which now I am the official driver of the business. And the last of the top three here are macros and scripts and SOPs. Oh my, I don't know if anybody gets that joke, but you know, this is the real nitty-gritty stuff. I'm just trying to make it interesting. So it's inevitable that your customers are going to have questions in your business. And macros really just make sure that everybody's answering those questions in the same way. You want to make sure that you're consistent. They're a must for your customer service team. And this also frees you up from answering that question every single time somebody answers it. Not just for customers, but people on the team, like, gee, how do we answer this question? It's in a macro, it's written out, it's in a little script, easy peasy, and our customer service team uses those all the time. So once you've delegated your responsibilities, now it's time to make sure that everything gets done correctly and consistently. And that's where SOPs come in. So really it's just about defining the result that you want. We have a little method for creating SOPs, which is the I do it, we do it, you do it strategy, which basically just means I'm the person who knows how to do it. This was Ezra in many cases. Let's do it together. Let's get on a call. Let me walk you through it. And then you do it. And then you create the SOP for it. So that brand new person is going to be the most thorough. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that brand new person who's just learning it for the first time, they're going to be the most thorough. Probably because they're going to come back to you 20 times to ask questions, but they're going to be the most thorough. They're not going to miss any steps. Someone who's been doing it for a while, you know the shortcuts, you know the quick cheats, you know, that's not the person who should be writing the SOP. It's the person who's just learning it because they want to make sure they don't miss any steps. And then create a library of these SOPs so that anybody pretty much on your team can complete that task, especially for mission critical tasks. SOPs are they've been a lifesaver for us. So those are the top three. That sort of stopped the bleeding, and everything, once these things were in place, everything sort of calmed down magically. So once that chaos has kind of calmed down, that's when we started to bring order into, so that we could scale, bring order into the business. So then these are the top 5 routines that helped us for scaling. The first one is taking inventory. And that's not, I don't mean like a physical inventory of your products, but basically the inventory of the projects or initiatives that you have going on from a project management perspective. So what is it that you're trying to accomplish and why? These are the questions you're going to ask yourself. Then you're going to prioritize those projects based on your objectives. Your objectives may be, you know, brand recognition. They may be, so visibility. They may be revenue. So depending on what those, you know, what those objectives are, that's how you're going to prioritize. What's the most important to you? You're going to build and invest in your team. Where are the gaps? You know, this is something that I'd like to get off my plate, but we have no one to do it. What is the cost to buy the help to do that? Really kind of getting your org chart figured out, which is coming up here too. So resource allocation. Who's doing what? Again, you've got those job descriptions. You've figured that part out. You're going to figure out your team leads and your reporting structure. This is all, you know, it doesn't matter how big your team is. Your team could be 3 people, but all the roles have to kind of be assigned and be very obvious to everyone what that structure is. And as I said, the org chart. The game changer for us was creating a visual org chart. We just made it in a software called Glyphy. It's really just little boxes and who reports to whom, and that changed things for us because people knew who to go to. They stopped going to Ezra for everything. A lot of them started coming to me for everything, but we slowly made it so that there were direct reports and made it very visible. That's also super helpful when you're onboarding new people. It's like, this is the structure of the business, this is who reports to whom. The next thing, so this is number 2 in our routines, is we started to have regular meetings and started to regulate the communication in the company. Prior to me coming on board, Ezra had, as I said, a weekly meeting on Mondays, sometimes the second one on Thursdays if he was feeling it. They usually went 90 minutes to 2 hours. People were falling asleep. It was terrible. But basically, we kind of pared that down to, we established a regular team meeting on Mondays. On those all team meetings, this was with everyone in the company. It was kind of like a happy Monday, let's kick off the week together. They're all on Zoom. We require everyone to have their camera turned on so we know you're awake and you can bring your coffee to your meeting, whatever you need to do. Our team, by the way, is completely virtual, so that's how we do our team meetings. And we kind of cover just the high-level stuff on this call. Here's what's going on this week, so the customer service team knows what launches are happening, knows where the volume might come, like what types of questions. They're kind of, can mentally prepare for that. But we don't try to talk about everything on this one call. And that was a big shift for us. Have team members, I should actually point out on the sub-team calls, so we have this all-team call, which is the entire company, to kick off the week. And then we encourage each one of those teams, those sub-teams, like the design team will have their own call, so they can get deep in the weeds on design, and the copy team has their call. It's a completely separate call. So we're not talking about, as we used to do on Mondays, we're talking about copy, and we're talking about design, and like when we're talking about copy, the designers are, off thinking about other things. We keep things very focused now. And we also, on the sub-team calls, we ask, if you're responsible for that actual thing, to report on that thing, that design, whatever it is, you bring that information to the call. There's not one call boss who's gonna, talk about everything. It's a collaborative effort. And that helped our team members stay really accountable. We also are very diligent about keeping the communications in the appropriate channel. We use Slack. Everything, all the chats are on Slack. And we are pretty structured about how we have the channels. So if you're talking about design, talk about it in the design channel. We kind of, not that we discourage private messaging or direct messaging if it's necessary, but if it's about a certain project or a certain initiative, it happens in that channel, and we set all those channels up beforehand. We've also retired a whole lot of channels because you think you're going to talk about something a lot, and then, so we're really flexible about that, building channels for appropriate conversations. Emails, we don't really use email between each other that much, but in the office situation, like during a work day, it's Slack. We jump on Zoom real quick. We do like to have as much interaction as we can to kind of be super clear on things. And then we set similar expectations for outsourced help. So when we hire someone, for example, our creative director is outsourced. She has her own agency, and she's just an amazing creative director, so we want her. So she works within these, she works within our Slack channels and our Zoom, in our meeting structure. So we set that similar rule so that it works for our team. The third, and this was a big one for us, was our task management system. We use Trello. We've tried Asana, we've used Basecamp, we've used many different things. When I first came on board, people were using Google Keep and just Word docs and sticky notes and back of a napkin, and everybody had their own list, and we said we're just going to kind of bring that all together. Everything's going to be in the same place, and that's really the key. You can use any, I'm not advocating for any particular software as long as everyone's using the same one. So we also start with our calendar. We want to plan out as far in advance as we possibly can. As I mentioned earlier, Ezra was, not really down with the calendar so much. I said, let's get the calendar planned out, and then the calendar's the boss. You don't have to be the bad guy. It's like we put it on the calendar. The calendar says we got to get this done by this date. It's not, not personal. So just being able to get everyone to, to buy into the calendar and be part of the process of creating that was really great. And that put an end to the cramming right away. People knew when something had to be done and they could plan for it. We did choose, as I said, Trello. Doesn't matter which one you use, as long as the whole team is using the same one. One of the things that really was helpful for us too, and Trello has some pretty cool features where you can create cards that repeat themselves. Is you want to streamline these repetitive tasks by creating checklists. So if it's the same thing and you're doing it, once a week or whatever it might be, create a checklist in Trello or in whatever software you're using, and this dovetails nicely with the SOP, so that you know how to do something, but you've got all the checklist items right there. So as many templates and checklists as possible, when it comes to especially very detailed routines that you don't want to miss steps on. Kanban for the win. That's one method that we use, when we're working on, working on certain things. Kanban is, when you sort of create a workflow, and we move our cards through Trello. That's why we sort of like Trello. But Kanban is a good system for us too. Transparency and visibility, allowing your team to kind of know what everybody else is doing too. Especially in a virtual company, it's tricky to have that visibility, and a task management system really does allow for that, because you might think, oh, our artist, no problem, he can, he has plenty of time to create that stuff. Meanwhile, if you look at all the other things, you can kind of see what he's got on his plate. It just opens, it's better visibility, creates, a little bit less question as to, how busy people are. And also as the COO, you kind of see patterns develop. If someone is just super overworked all the time, you're seeing that they're not moving their cards. They're always, they've always got tons of stuff on their plate. Maybe it's time, we need a new resource. We need to get another designer in there, whatever it might be. The fourth is reporting and documentation. So, what are the things after you complete a project cycle or a sale? What are the things that you're always going back and looking at? So establish those KPIs, which we really didn't have, KPIs necessarily. Ezra did in his own mind, but it was about extracting those KPIs. He's the one guy doing everything for a couple years, and now he has a team. Let's get someone else to be responsible for those KPIs. As I said, creating templates and dashboards that you're able to review as a team, was super helpful too. The project charter. This is just a little invention that I created when Ezra and I were working at Digital Marketer together on that brown box formula. Was really just the project charter in its simplest form. It's really just a spreadsheet. A Google spreadsheet where all the information having to do with that project, except the sensitive stuff, like we didn't put sales data or anything like that, but it was a place where our customer service team could go to find out, when are the dates of a certain initiative happening, when is the sale open, when does it close, just all the links that, different landing pages, everything was located on this project charter. Storing your documents, this was another thing that was really helpful, was establishing where is all the stuff we create on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, where are we storing it all? Is it Drive? Is it Dropbox? When I got there, it was personal computer, some was in Dropbox. The artists loved Dropbox, and the nerds like me love Drive, and so we had to kind of come up with a happy medium. But the point, again, is everybody's got to be putting stuff in the same place. And have your team follow that. Have a training on it. This is where we want everything to go. Make it very clear. And then last but not least was Post-Mortem and team acknowledgement. Now before this, it was almost like a cycle never closed because you'd go from one cycle and just into the next one, and we'd never kind of step back and review what happened, what just happened in that cycle. We'd start asking ourselves things like, what went well? What could we do next time? So we really implemented a post-mortem meeting after really any big initiative, a big sale, an event, a launch of an information product, or whatever it might be, and we kind of reviewed that project charter, which we were maintaining the whole time, and we really came up with some good optimizations for the next time. As far as team acknowledgement, Ezra is all about team acknowledgement, and so you want to definitely create a reward system for consistently great work. We have amazing people on our team, and yes, they get their paycheck, and that's always nice. But every once in a while, some sort of acknowledgement above and beyond, especially when your team is going above and beyond, is really nice. Whether that's a public acknowledgement on a team call, giving them more responsibility, just a pat on the back, a private message, whatever it is, acknowledgement, it goes a long way. And it doesn't always have to be financial, although that doesn't suck either. Point is, you want to love on your team. You didn't get there yourself. You want to make sure that they know they're acknowledged, and so find that one thing that works for your team. Basically, to kind of close, the point of this was, you as the business owner, you want to get to a place where you drive less and navigate more. You want to be able to have these systems in place so that your team is sort of doing the driving for you, whether it's one person or you have multiple people who are helping drive different channels in your business. The point of you as the business owner is that you want to have that free time to be thinking and creating and innovating. You want to build in buffer days. This is a big one. Sometimes it doesn't get done in the amount of time that you thought it might get done. You definitely want to build in those buffer days. You want to build in days off for yourself. Self-care, taking care of yourself is huge. If you run out of gas, I think we talked about it at the women's conference yesterday, the oxygen mask theory. If you are out of oxygen, you can't help anybody else. And you as the innovator, as the business owner, you really need to make sure that you are, refreshed. And that's an important thing. And it's not something maybe you can do right away, but you want to eventually get to that place where you're able to refresh and recharge. Because business is a marathon, and hopefully you're in it for the long haul. So that's all.
Awesome, thank you. First time speaking?
Second, really.
Second
well,
time.
Here, I spoke yesterday, but I've spoken with Ezra a
Yeah.
couple times. But usually I have Ezra's like right there to play off of.
Yeah, so I think she did amazing.
Thank you.
I also found out it was like Liz is only like your fourth time speaking, right? Not in like a panel type situation. So
Yeah.
I think both of you guys did amazing, and thank you. And we have like a couple of minutes, so if we have a question or two, we can do that. Okay, hold on. Okay, so now when you ask questions, say your name, what degree you're going after, and no.
Excellent presentation, really good stuff.
Thank you.
And nice and concise, appreciate it. Do you think that cross-training is part of your priorities? I didn't see that on the list anywhere.
Definitely wasn't on the list, but it's important. Yeah. It depends on the size of your team. Smaller teams, certainly the cross-training is pretty important. And I did mention it just in the SOP section there. Especially mission critical stuff. We have, one person on our team. He is the CTO and the president, and he's been made the president, but he was the CTO, and basically he knows how to do everything. And so, but obviously some of those things are not the best use of his time anymore. So when we bought some help for his team and started growing his team out, we had her trained, but he still knows how to do certain things.
But even on the lower levels, do you teach them how to do each other's jobs? Do you teach them how to do each other's jobs at the lower levels?
Not
Absentees and
everyone. Not everyone. Certainly depends on the job. You know, obviously, copywriters, we wouldn't be teaching cross-training necessarily. We have multiple copywriters. Same with designers. You know, it's not something that you can necessarily cross-train. But it depends. Yeah, it would depend on the position, I suppose.
So I think on those type of positions, cross training isn't as critical as SOPs.
Right.
And so, especially like Mark, I know you run a warehouse, so you're like cross training. You may want somebody cross trained so they can do inbound and do outbound, but more importantly, you want an SOP so that if you hire somebody new, there's a standard way of training the new people when they come on board, right? When anytime you have, we're going to hear about that, I think, when we get into some of the consultants and VAs, and you know what makes hiring a VA successful is providing them that SOP and the ability for them to follow that process. Because one of the things we've learned is you can't manage somebody if you don't have a process by which you're managing them. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we're going to break for, we'll do one last question. I don't have my phone on me, so now I'm not getting the steps counted.
Hi, first of all, I really enjoyed it, so thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a little bit about prioritizing, right? I mean, you know, with Amazon, there's always new techniques and things you can do, so there's always SOPs that you can add. And I wanted to ask if you have any methods for how to prioritize the tasks within your business and how to decide what is more important than other.
I mean, I think that's definitely driven by the business owner. As I said, you know, prioritizing all the initiatives that you may want to do is simple if the business owner knows, like, what are the priorities? Is it brand recognition? Is it revenue? Is it, you know, creating a new product? I think, you know, there's definitely a balance there. Oh, I said the B word, but there's definitely a balance there. Certainly if you're trying to be innovating and creating new products or source, it just depends. But you kind of have to have that conversation first, and then prioritizing the projects that you actually want to do becomes a lot easier when you know what your ultimate goal is.
Yeah, and that joke is from yesterday when the title of the speech was "Balance is BS," right? Because we all know that in our lives, balance is, I guess, subjective.
Right.
Right. All right, great. We're going to break for lunch.